Hello, I'm Matt Donnelly. It's Friday night, and it is time to get hyped with the Fantasy Points Friday Night Hype Show. We are going to preview a plethora of contests this week, including the Baltimore Ravens versus the New York Giants, the Arizona Cardinals, the Seattle Seahawks, the Buffalo Bills, the Kansas City Chiefs, and of course, the Sunday Night Football primetime preview here, the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. But before we get into this week's slate of contests, we have a bunch of injuries that we need to break down for you here, starting with Rashad Penny, that broken fibula there. He is out for the season. So Kenneth Walker, you're next in line. We also have Tyreek Hill, who's battling that foot/quad injury there. It looks like he's going to be ready to go. Teddy Bridgewater, concussion. Per Tom Pelissero there. Tua Tagovailoa, he is making progress there. He was on the field, going through some of those drills, seeing if he can progress through that concussion protocol. It is unlikely that he plays Sunday, but at least he's heading in the right direction. Pat Freiermuth, concussion. Chris Olave, it looks like he's going to be ready this weekend as he's coming back from a concussion. T. Higgins, he still has that high ankle sprain. Looks like he's good to go. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, they were both at practice on Thursday. Baker Mayfield, he is out. This is more of an addition through subtraction for the Carolina Panthers. James Conner, he's dealing with the ribs. It looks like he's unlikely to go on Sunday. We also have Nyheim Hines through the concussion situation there. Keenan Allen is still dealing with that hamstring. Rashad Bateman, now keep an eye on this. He was sidelined on Thursday dealing with that foot injury. Even if he plays on Sunday, he's probably not playing in my rosters there. Dawson Knox, Jameis Winston still dealing with that back issue there. We've also got Michael Thomas with the toe, Treylon Burks with the toe. Dak Prescott, he was throwing on Wednesday, throwing on Thursday. There's a chance he could play, but we're not going to worry about that quite yet. Kadarius Toney, he's got the other hamstring to worry about. If you want to stay up to date with all these injuries that are going on, you got to make sure you're heading over to Fantasy Points right now. Check out our very own DPT, Edwin Porras there for injury updates heading into week 6 and beyond. That said, let's get into the slate of games here that we're not going to quite cover here, starting with San Francisco at Atlanta. The Falcons, they are rocking the red lids. And Pitts versus a 49ers zone coverage, it has to add up to fantasy production, doesn't it? We got New England versus the Cleveland Browns there. Ramondre versus Nick Chubb. Mama, let the big boys run. Ramondre Stevenson, Nick Chubb, plenty of running going on there in Cleveland, hopefully this week. The New York Jets at the Green Bay Packers. Upset special. Getting Breesy with it in Green Bay. Breece Hall versus that Packers run defense. Oh, it's on. And you can expect a heavy dose of play action there coming from the Jets. Breece Hall, he leads all running backs with 50-plus carries there in explosive play percentage there. 10.7% of his carries have gone for 15-plus yards, and that is per Fantasy Points data. We got Jacksonville at Indianapolis, Week 2 rematch in which the Jaguars won 24-0. Cincinnati at New Orleans. Eli Apple returns to the Bayou there for some swine and crawfish. What could go wrong? Minnesota at Miami. Did the Vikings hunt Dolphins? I need answers right now. Hey, Alexa. You know what? Never mind. We'll get that later. Tampa Bay at Pittsburgh. Hey, here's an idea. The loser has to take back AB. Come get your guy. Carolina at the Los Angeles Rams. Matt Rule is gone. Is CMC next? What about DJ Moore? Cooper Kupp now has 49 receptions through 5 games, which is an NFL record. Maybe Matthew Stafford should look elsewhere for some production every once in a while. Denver at Los Angeles. Awesome. We get another primetime Broncos game. Really, NFL? Really? Anyway, we've got 4 teams on the bye this week. That includes the Detroit Lions, the Houston Texans, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Tennessee Titans. So let's dive in here. Let's start with the Baltimore Ravens at the New York Giants. That's right. The 3-2 Ravens at the 4-1 New York Giants. Let's put some respect on New York while we're at it. Now, Baltimore, this season, Lamar Jackson has thrown for 1,067 yards, and he's also rushed for 374. The 374 rushing yards, that is the 9th most in the entire league entering week number 6. A healthy portion of those passing yards, they have gone to Mark Andrews. Andrews' 32 receptions have led to the 15th most receiving yards this season, 349, which is also the most amongst the tight end position. Now, here's one thing that no one's going to tell you right now that you probably should know. The Giants defense, it has actually been pretty good against quarterbacks this season, allowing the 10th fewest fantasy points per game against, allowing just 14.42, and they have also allowed the 5th fewest passing yards to date. So people looking for that get-right game for Jackson this week, it may not happen, so temper those expectations. Expect Jackson to struggle a little bit again. As I mentioned, Bateman dealing with that foot injury. He's going to be out possibly this game, which means we're going to be looking for someone else that needs to step up. The last couple weeks, Jackson has averaged less than 6 yards per attempt. To steal from Graham Barfield's stat pack there over at fantasypoints.com, dating back to last year, Mark Andrews has finished as a top 5 fantasy tight end in 11 of 14 contests. There's literally just 2 tight ends in the National Football League right now, and then just a bunch of other dudes. I haven't even gotten out of bed successfully 11 times out of the last 14 days without injuring myself. Now, I mentioned the Bateman injury to his foot. You are going to want to monitor this situation closely as we get closer and closer to kickoff. If you have any other options right now, I would suggest you make that pivot right now and put Bateman on your bench and just kind of see what happens from there. Since Bateman has been limited on the field, it has been Devin Duvernay and the Devin Duvernay show. He literally is the only other receiver that the Baltimore Ravens have. Duvernay is averaging 1.94 yards per route run the last couple weeks, and he's accounted for the rest of the air yards for the Ravens that do not belong to Mark Andrews. That's 41%. If Andrews is getting 75% of the targets, hey, don't fact check me. That's just what it feels like. Then Duvernay, he's going to be getting a healthy 21% of the target share, which makes him a strong flex play once again. Get that motor running. Head out on the highway. The Gus Bus is eligible to come off the pup this week. But will he? I don't know. But I do know that the Ravens can certainly use him right now. As it appears, Dobbins is nowhere near 100% as of yet, averaging just 3.9 yards per carry on his 28 attempts so far this season. Last time that we saw a healthy Dobbins, he was averaging 6 yards per carry. Now, one team that doesn't have any issues there at the running back position is the New York Giants, the 4-1 New York Giants there. It's Saquon Barkley, and then everybody else when it comes to this team right now. I have a hard time believing that the New York Giants are a true 4-1 squad. But hey, they did take down Aaron Rodgers and the Pack in London last week, so let's show the G-Men a little bit of respect. Barkley's 533 rushing yards and his 5 rushes of greater than 20 yards sits only second to Cleveland Browns running back there, Nick Chubb. What should get fans excited is, if they aren't already, is that the fact that he has broken off 2 runs of 40-plus yards. Only DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard, and Taysom Hill have accomplished that so far this season. With no Kenny Golladay or Kadarius Toney, Daniel Jones has been targeting local mailman and the butcher shop guy down the street there. I'm only partially kidding there, of course. But Darius Slayton has emerged as a top option in this passing game there, while Daniel Bellinger there, Richie James, Marcus Johnson, they have all chipped in where they can. Hopefully help is on the way in the form of Wan'Dale Robinson, who looks close to returning to game action this week. Baltimore secondary, they have turned it up the last couple weeks. After allowing more fantasy points to receivers than any other team the previous 3 weeks, they have allowed the 12th fewest fantasy points per game to receivers the last 2 weeks, allowing just 20.4 fantasy points per game and 430 yards. Now, we know the Giants don't really have a whole lot of options in that passing game, but the Giants, they do have a course of action which they can follow, and that is run the ball like a Pop Warner team, giving the ball to their best player, Saquon Barkley, every single opportunity. And every once in a while, you let the little sneaky fast guy there, Daniel Jones, take it for a run every once in a while. Now, next up on the docket here, we have the 2-3 Arizona Cardinals taking on the 2-3 Seattle Seahawks. Why are we previewing a game of 2 sub-500 teams? Because this is exciting. Hey, plus, and I have to get my quota of birds in my previews each and every week. It's just in my contract. Now, Arizona, how bad has Kyler Murray truly been this season? And why is nobody actually talking about how bad he is? I mean, I feel that he's been so bad, like of epic proportions here, but I don't want to show my bias here too much. I got no problem showing a little bit of bias every once in a while. So I went out, I found some numbers. Basically, I just cherry-picked the ones that confirm what I want to believe in. So far this season, he sits 15th in passing yards with 1,241. He ranks 21st in passer rating at 84.3, 23rd in touchdown rate, checking in at 2.8%. And this is with guys like Zach Ertz, Marquise Brown. He's also got about 5.8 yards per attempt, which is 29th in the league, after averaging 7.9 yards per attempt last season, while his yards per completion currently is 30th among quarterbacks with at least 100 attempts. Yeah, I would say he's struggling a little bit. Now, Seattle, they have allowed 1,318 passing yards this season to opposing quarterbacks, which happens to be the 9th most, along with 19.12 fantasy points per game, which is the 10th most, along with those 8 touchdowns. That all being said, when Murray decides to make something happen in the pass game, Marquise Hollywood Brown is going to be heavily involved. Brown has seen double-digit targets in each of the last 4 games and is averaging 11 targets per contest thus far. Don't look now, but Hollywood is sitting 6th in fantasy points for wide receivers with 97.7 in 5 contests, while Zach Ertz sits 4th amongst the tight ends there at 64.9 fantasy points. Ertz could be in for a big day as Seattle is allowing more fantasy points per game to the tight end position than any other team. They have allowed on average 26.14 fantasy points per game there, while surrendering a league high 456 receiving yards to the position. The next closest team, it's actually the Arizona Cardinals. Now, Seattle has been tough on receivers for fantasy purposes, having allowed the third fewest receiving yards so far at 661, and the fourth fewest fantasy points to the position, 28.14. Even though Seattle has proved to be a difficult matchup in fantasy, their secondary has somehow received the second worst in coverage grade this season. But don't write off rookie Tyreek Woolen there, whose 40.5 passer rating against is the fourth best amongst corners this season. Not just fourth best amongst rookies, fourth best amongst the cornerback position. Now, keep an eye on this Cardinals backfield, especially James Conner's status, as the injury reports kind of get closer and closer to game day. He's dealing with that rib injury. He wasn't on the field there on Thursday. There's a good chance that he is not going to be able to make it. And history has shown that he's going to miss time from time to time. He's going to miss it. No, that's what's going to happen now. Now, Eno Benjamin last week, he took control of this backfield, posting 53 yards on 11 touches while seeing a 56% route participation. In a game I'm expecting plenty of points to be scored, Benjamin has some great PPR value. For the Seattle Seahawks, who would have guessed it that the Seahawks offense without Russell Wilson would be one of the most dynamic offenses for fantasy football? Seattle plays fast and they play even harder. Seattle has finished a drive with a touchdown 28% of the time, which is the sixth best mark in the NFL. And you can attribute that to Geno Smith and what he has been cooking thus far. Smith has 1,305 passing yards, 9 touchdowns. He's got one of the best deep ball completion percentages there. He averages 8.4 yards per attempt, and these are all amongst the top 12 amongst the quarterback position. He also has the highest completion percentage at 75.2% and the highest passer rating in the NFL at 113.2. Per fantasy points data, Geno Smith has been wowing the NFL this season, leading the league in wow throw percentage with 7.6. We know his completion percentage is the best in the game right now, but how good has he actually been? When you look at the completion percentage over expectation, Smith leads the league again, and it's not even close. He's got a 9.1% there, while the next closest, Josh Allen, sits at 5.4%. When Geno is cooking, the DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, they'd be eating. Lockett is 8th in fantasy points this season with 82.6 in PPR formats on the strength of 32 receptions, 2 touchdowns, and 406 yards. Well, Metcalf has 372 yards on 28 receptions, scoring twice, and he sits 19th amongst receivers with 73.2 fantasy points this season. Maybe it wasn't Russell Wilson that was kind of driving this offense all along. Now, Seattle, hey, every time there's some good news, there's got to be some bad news there. We know they lost Rashawn Penny for the rest of the season after he broke his fibula last week in New Orleans there. He's looking at another 4-month rehab, which unfortunately he's all too familiar with at this point in his career. Once Penny left, it was predictably Kenneth Walker who assumed the lead back responsibilities with 88% of the snap share there, getting 100% of the carries along with a 58% route participation rate. Walker this season ranks 16th in yards after contact per attempt and breakaway rate, while sitting 4th according to PFF in elusive rating. Further to that, Walker has avoided tackles on 48% of his attempts so far this season, which is the 3rd best mark amongst the running backs this season with 20 or more attempts, while averaging 5.74 yards after contact, which is actually the 2nd best mark in the National Football League. That all said, Arizona is allowing the 12th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing running backs this season, allowing just 20.66 fantasy points per contest. Now we get into the big games here of the week, the ones that everyone wants to talk about, perhaps the AFC Championship preview here with the 4-1 Buffalo Bills heading to Arrowhead to take on the 4-1 Kansas City Chiefs. First, for the Buffalo Bills, Gabriel Davis saw his highest target share of the season, checking out at 16.7%. and popping off for 171 yards on 3 receptions, 6 targets, scoring twice last week. That should sound familiar to Chiefs fans there, because the last time the Bills faced the Chiefs, Davis hauled in 8 of 10 targets for 201 yards and 4 touchdowns in that AFC divisional playoff game. The Chiefs will have their hands full with Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis this week, and maybe even throw in Isaiah McKenzie there, who has some sneaky value, especially if Davis is back to full health. Now, we know what Davis did the last time that these teams met, so I try not to live in the past too much, again, unless, of course, again, it fits my narrative. That said, presently, Stephon Diggs, he sits 4th in receiving yards with 508 on 39 receptions. Again, pulling from Graham Barfield's stat pack, over Davis's last 8 games where he's played at least 80% of the snaps and not been on that injury report, Davis has 33 receptions, 708 yards, 11 touchdowns on just 56 targets. He has scored at least 1 touchdown in 6 of those 8 games in that span while averaging 21.3 fantasy points per game. So if Davis is healthy, he's going to be productive. That said, L'Jarius Sneed, Rashad Fenton will be asked to defend both these Bills receivers, and neither of them were able to stop Davante Adams a week ago. In fact, the best combination at stopping Adams last week was Hunter Renfrow and a cameraman. Now, the Chiefs' pass defense is allowing a 105.5 passer rating this season and has surrendered 12 touchdowns while allowing the 7th most fantasy points per game to the position. Buffalo is once again flirting with the idea of bringing in Christian McCaffrey to lead this backfield. If you remember earlier in the offseason, Adam Kaplan told Fantasy Points that the Bills had reached out to the Panthers in this regard. It appears they have once again looked at this option. Devin Singletary factors in the equation only when the Bills are in close contests. If the Bills are in a game that is within 1 score, then Singletary happens to be on the field 76% of the snaps. When the Bills are up by more than 1 score, that actually drops to 46%, which seems kind of backwards. You think if you're up in the game, you want to run that clock out, you're going to be getting your running backs involved. Only 2 of the Bills' 5 games so far this season have been within that single score range there. So you can factor into this whole equation that Singletary could be involved in this game, assuming that this is going to be a lot closer game than the rest of their contests have been so far this season. A couple of weeks ago, we mentioned the historic pace that both Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen had been on, with the pace that they had been setting. Now, through 5 weeks, Allen has averaged the 3rd most fantasy points per game by a quarterback over that stretch, while his worst finishes actually came in week 4 when he had to settle to be the QB6. Last week, Allen finished with a 134.1 passer rating there, a 425 passing yards, and 4 touchdowns against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, Kansas City, where the heck has this Chiefs running game gone? Last week, it was null and void. It was no longer there. And more importantly, what the heck is going on with Clyde Edwards-Helaire? We've been spoiled by CEH's efficiency for 4 weeks, and finally the truth has reared its ugly head. And last week, Jerick McKinnon outsnapped Edwards-Helaire, and McKinnon also outproduced him. There was no touchdown to save CEH last week. CEH just saw 43% of a snap share and a 52% opportunity share last week, and literally no fantasy production. This week, I am avoiding the Chiefs backfield altogether, as the Buffalo Bills have allowed the 9th fewest fantasy points to opposing backs this season. I'll be honest here, I'm kind of still giggling when Patrick Mahomes hit CEH in the back of the head on that one play. Yeah, it was still pretty good. Maybe that's just the Raider fan in me, let's be honest. Now, speaking of the Raiders, hopefully the Bills can actually defend Kelce in the red zone, unlike the Raiders had done the week before. On the surface, hey, holding Kelce to 7 catches and 25 yards, that looks like a huge win until you realize that 4 of those 7 catches were in the end zone on Monday Night Football. This season, Buffalo has held their opposing tight ends to 7.58 fantasy points per game, which happens to be the 7th fewest, and they have allowed just 169 receiving yards to this position without yielding a score. If the Bills somehow manage to take Kelce away or contain him to a degree, what Chief is going to step up? Will Juju Smith-Schuster finally do something? Perhaps Marquez Valdes-Scantling can catch as many passes as he happens to drop, or we finally get that Sky Moore breakout game that we all want right now. If Buffalo watched what Chandler Jones and Max Crosby did last week, then you know they're certainly going to be able to have some success in that pass rush game with Von Miller and Gregory Rousseau, who have also been able to get pressure on the quarterback on 29.5% of the dropbacks this season. And finally, Sunday Night Football, Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles. Let's get it on. Now, for the Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb loves himself some Cooper Rush, and Cooper Rush, he loves himself some CeeDee Lamb. Lamb is the only receiver, that's it, right, you heard that correctly, the only receiver in the NFL to see a 30% target share in every game this season. The only one. In fact, Lamb has accounted for 44% of the Cowboys' yards this season, and he has a 38% target share, which leads all receivers through 5 weeks. He's also averaging 6.82 yards per target and is 3rd among receivers this season in targets per route run there at 33%. With great power comes great responsibility, and Darius Slay, who's been as good as it gets at defending opposing wide receivers, allowing a 45.2 pass rate and intercepting 2 passes, although it probably should have been more like 8 when you take that primetime game against Kirk Cousins into account. If Lamb is locked in with Darius Slay, then someone else is going to have to step up. And that often leaves Michael Gallup and Noah Brown. Now, Gallup is going to likely draw James Bradbury, who's been as good, if not better than Slay when it comes to coverage right now. So Noah Brown may be the hero that the Dallas Cowboys need in this contest. An interesting stat that I found courtesy of Fantasy Points data, there are 3 receivers in the NFL that have a higher yards per route run average coming out of the slot than even Cooper Kupp. They happen to be Justin Jefferson, Randall Cobb, and Noah Brown, who's averaging 2.94 yards. Rush, he doesn't have to be great in this offense. He just has to make sure that he doesn't turn over the ball. And you know what? He's been pretty good at that because he knows that his defense, it can get after the ball. If you look at Cooper Rush, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. I think I'd rather have him than Matthew Stafford right now, who's thrown for 4 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Now let's talk about this Cowboys defense because this is one of the best defenses in the NFL. Micah Parsons is the great equalizer, especially when the Cowboys face a player as dynamic as Jalen Hurts is under center. Micah Parsons' numbers so far this season, 33% pass rush win rate there. 7 of his 19 tackles, they've been for a loss. 12 quarterback hits, 14 quarterback pressures, 6 sacks, a fumble, and a partridge in a pear tree. Now, Parsons, he recorded 2 more sacks last week, giving him 19 in his first 21 career games. The only player in NFL history with more sacks in their first 21 contests was Joey Bosa when he had 20. It's not just Parsons either. This Dallas team is a nightmare, and Parsons is bringing his friends with him. They've got 20 sacks on the season, and Doris Armstrong, he has 4. DeMarcus Lawrence has 3. These guys have been providing additional help. Now, when we're taking a look at Jalen Hurts' passing numbers here per PFF, when he is not blitzed, he has a 90.5 PFF offensive grade, which ranks second, a 9.9 yards per attempt there, which ranks first, and he's completed 73% of his passes, which happens to be third. Now, when he is blitzed, these numbers, they all drop drastically. His PFF offensive grade drops to 27th at 57.3. His yards per attempt drops down to 5.8, which is the 31st best mark in the league, and his 58% completion percentage, that is 25th. Now, we know that the Dallas Cowboys, they like to bring it. They're going to bring it from all ends of the spectrum here. They're coming to attack from the outside, the inside. It doesn't matter. They're attacking all over the place. And Dallas has allowed the 8th fewest fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season. On average, they're allowing 11.66 fantasy points per game, and they have not allowed multiple scores in any contest so far. Now for the Philadelphia Eagles, another week, another record for Jalen Hurts. This time, Hurts broke Cam Newton's record for rushing touchdowns by a quarterback within the first 25 career starts. With 2 more rushing touchdowns last Sunday, Hurts now has 19 career rushing touchdowns in 25 games, which is 1 more than Cam Newton had previously set. Hurts enters week 6 with the 7th most passing yards this season with 1,359, along with 269 yards on the ground. I don't even try to hide how much I love Jalen Hurts anymore. Let's be honest. Now, if you take those rushing numbers and you apply them strictly as a running back, that rushing total right there that I mentioned, that would rank 23rd in rushing yards. That's not even including the 6 rushing touchdowns that he has so far. The combination of his arm and his legs have led to fantasy finishes there in the top 4 in 4 of the 5 weeks so far this season. We also have another great cornerback versus wide receiver matchup on the other side of the ball as A.J. Brown faces off with Trevon Diggs as they are set to do battle under the lights on Sunday. Brown, he currently sits second in yards per route run from the outside there per PFF, while his target share through 5 weeks is the 7th highest at 30%. Last week, Diggs was put on roller skates against Cooper Kupp and company, allowing a touchdown and 178 yards on 7 receptions. Now, Diggs has been feast or famine, but he's been money on those deep ball throws so far this season. So if the Eagles are going to take advantages, if they're going to attack Trevon Diggs, it's going to have to be underneath. Now, Brown's strength has certainly been what he can do after the catch. And this season is no different, with 157 of his 436 yards coming after the catch, as he has averaged 15.6 yards per reception. Now, Devontae Smith, the Slim Reaper. Hey, we're in the Halloween month here. We're talking about the Slim Reaper here. He's been pretty good since that disaster of a week 1. He has now put together 15-plus fantasy points per week in 3 of the following 4 contests, while seeing a 25% target share along the way. But over the last 2 weeks, it's been Dallas Goedert who stepped up for the Eagles there. 13 receptions, 165 yards, and he has seen his target share and his route participation rate increased to a very respectable 26% and 95%. Dallas, for their part, they have played tight ends tough this season, allowing the ninth fewest fantasy points to date to the position, and they have yet to surrender a touchdown in 5 contests. Now, guess who sits fourth in rushing yards this season with 414, and he's on pace for 1,400 rushing yards this season. I'm going to stop you right there because you were not going to guess Miles Sanders. There's not a chance you were going to guess him. And even right now, you are doubting that this is true, so you're probably fact-checking me right now. Now, Sanders is averaging 4.8 yards per attempt this season, and he has scored 3 times on the ground. Now, Dallas, they have allowed the 18th most rushing yards so far to date at 454, but they sit 5th in fantasy points against the running back position, allowing just 17.8 per game. They've got that bend, don't break type mentality there. Now, I love defense. We've talked about the Dallas Cowboys defense, and rightfully so. They are fantastic. But right now, we have to show the Eagles defense a little love as well. Eagles defense, they have been getting their job done the last couple of weeks. So Cooper Rush is going to have to protect the ball and make some smart plays this week. Philadelphia ranks 4th in sacks with 17, and they're led by Hassan Reddick. They're 4.5. Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham each have 3 apiece, and they've applied pressure on 28% of the dropbacks. The Eagles' back end has been mirroring the front end as they've been able to pick off opposing quarterbacks 6 times, which happens to be the 6th most in the NFL. Now, the quote of the week is courtesy of former Eagles offensive lineman and current Cowboys offensive line, Jason Peters. I just know that Philly fans are effing idiots when it comes to camaraderie. The Dallas Cowboys, any team, they know that. They pride themselves on being nasty, vulgar. They're going to cuss you out. Philly fans are the wildest out there to me. And you know what? Hey, Philly fans, I think they take that as a badge of honor, so to speak. That all said, you've heard from me. Now I want to hear from you. Get in the comments below. Let me know what are the matchups, what are the headlines that you are looking forward to here in week number 6. And if you want to save yourself some money, maybe score some more, use promo code HYPE22. That's HYPE22. Get 10% off your Fantasy Point subscription today. We got whatever you need over there, including this great information that courtesy of the Fantasy Points data. Now, we've also got some great content on the YouTube channel starting on Mondays with the Monday grades with Wes Huber. That comes at you at 9 a.m. Eastern. Tuesdays, plug-in DFS review with Scott and JM2 Win. That's 2 p.m. Eastern. Wednesday, the midweek mailbag courtesy of Nick Script. And of course, Tuesday to Thursday, 9 a.m. Eastern, you get the daily lineup by Joe Dolan. And I'm going to leave you with this. When fantasy matchups don't go your way, just complain to the commissioner like I do. And we'll see you next week.